Sin number 1, failure to pay the minimum wage.
We'll pay you $5 an hour until you learn the ropes. Then we'll bump you up to $7 an hour.
Virtually all employees are entitled to receive at least the minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, but many states have higher minimum wages for all hours worked. Exceptions may be possible for workers with disabilities, full-time students, youth under age 20 and their first 90 consecutive days of employment, for wait staff, although their tips have to put them above the minimum wage, and for certain student learners. Sin number 2, failure to pay for all hours worked.
Be sure to stay close to your phone tonight in case that customer calls in from the West Coast. Clock out before you set up for tomorrow, okay?
Employers must pay non-exempt employees for all hours worked, even if the employee has volunteered to do the work without pay, and even if you have forbidden the employee to do the work. You can discipline the employee in that situation, but you have to pay for the hours. Some violations are blatant, like clock out and continue working, but some are not so obvious. For example, expecting non-exempt workers to take customer calls off hours, or insisting that they answer the phones during an unpaid lunch break. Sin number 3, misclassifying as exempt.
Your title is assistant manager. You're exempt.
You get a salary, so obviously you're exempt.
Organizations may wish to classify workers as exempt to avoid paying overtime and/or to avoid paying for extra hours worked. Unfortunately, an employee's title doesn't mean anything, and the fact that a person is paid on a salary basis does not mean they are definitely exempt, since they need to be paid on a salary basis in addition to having exempt job duties in order to be exempt. DOL has very specific guidelines for the main types of exemptions: administrative, executive, creative, and outside sales. Sin number 4, misclassifying as independent contractors.
You'll be working alongside our regular employees, but you'll be an independent contractor.
Of course he's an independent contractor. We signed an agreement.
Many employers are tempted to classify workers as independent contractors because it avoids many of the payments that have to be made to employees and on their behalf, for example, Social Security. But many so-called independent contractors are really employees. In general, the more control the employer has over how the person does the job, for example, giving explicit instructions, providing materials and tools, dictating hours, being the only customer, the more likely that worker is not an independent contractor. For sure, if the person is sitting right with the regular employees doing the same work, the person is likely an employee. Detailed sets of criteria from the DOL and the IRS help you make the determination of employee versus independent contractor. Sin number 5, failure to properly calculate and pay overtime.
We don't pay overtime. If you don't want the extra hours at your regular rate, just say so.
I need you to work 50 hours this week. Instead of your claiming overtime, I'll give you some comp time next month.
Employers can't avoid their obligation to pay overtime. Under federal law, except in very limited circumstances, overtime at the rate of 1.5 times the regular rate is due for all hours worked over 40 in a work week. Private employers may not use a comp time system. Another very common violation is failure to pay overtime based on the regular rate of pay, which includes any non-discretionary bonuses. So, for example, if at the end of the month workers get a production bonus, you have to go back and recalculate their overtime premium. Sin number 6, inappropriate deductions.
Just because you're a manager doesn't mean you can come in late. I'm docking you a half day's pay.
I'm sorry to hear that you're leaving, but you do understand that the amount you owe on the company loan will be deducted from your final paycheck.
There are a number of restrictions on deductions from pay. For example, for exempt employees, partial day deductions are generally prohibited. Such deductions would be treating the exempt employee like an hourly employee, and the exemption could be lost. Detailed rules exist regarding deductions for meals and lodging, clothing and protective gear, donning and doffing time, shortages and damage, and so on. Finally, many states have specific rules governing final paychecks. Sin number 7, forgetting state law.
Here in California, we pay overtime just like the federal law requires.
Many states have their own laws regarding wage and hour. For example, in California, all travel time is paid time, whereas under federal law, only travel time that coincides with the normal workday is compensable. In California, overtime at 1.5 times the employee's regular rate is owed for hours worked in excess of 8 hours a day, or for the first 8 hours worked on the 7th consecutive day worked in a work week. Double time must be paid for hours worked in excess of 12 in a workday, or worked in excess of 8 on the 7th consecutive day worked in any work week. These payments are not owed under federal law. Sin number 8, making side agreements.
Hey, I'm out of overtime for this month. If you work off the clock this week, I'll make it up to you next month.
Dave, I think I need to stay late. Can I get some overtime?
Oh, no. Whoa. There is absolutely no overtime in the budget. None whatsoever. But you and your wife can have a night on the town on the company card.
These agreements likely violate the FLSA. Employees can't waive their right to overtime or pay for hours worked, even if they agree, even if they are eager to help out by doing a little work on the side without pay. Sin number 9, assuming that interns do not have to be paid.
You'll be working for us as an intern, so you won't be paid. But you'll learn a lot by subbing for employees who are on vacation.
Many managers and supervisors think that if someone is an intern, that means they don't have to be paid. Actually, the DOL's Wage Hour Division has detailed and strict guidelines for when an internship can be unpaid, and most internships do not qualify. Briefly, unpaid interns can't do regular company work. They have to be in a learning capacity. Certain circumstances, like getting college credit, may alter the situation. Check the guidelines before establishing an unpaid intern program. Sin 10, failure to observe rules regarding youth employment.
Hey Jimmy, listen, I know it's a school night, but a couple of the members of the team are sick, and I was wondering if you could just stay a couple hours tonight. I know you said you had some homework, but I'm sure you can get that done on the bus on the way to school in the morning.
Tracy, happy 15th birthday. Why don't you hop on the forklift and run this cardboard out to the crusher, would you?
There are very clearly spelled out rules governing the work hours and type of work for younger workers. Make sure to review them with supervisors when you hire young workers. And here's a bonus sin: failure to keep accurate records.
You don't need to record your hours every day. I know when you're working.
In most of the judgments against employers for wage and hour failures, there's an additional charge: failure to keep accurate records. Besides being a violation itself, it also leads to an unpleasant situation. In the absence of records, courts tend to take the employee's word for how many hours were worked. Okay, that's our top 10 sins, plus 1, of managing wage and hour. Avoid them and stay hassle and lawsuit free. For wage hour questions and for all your HR challenges, we recommend hr.blr.com. This is Steve Bruce for the HR Daily Advisor.